Hello, Facebook Live. This is welcome to the next episode of the Epic Vibe Show with Dr. Vibe, myself, Dr. Stephen Schwartz, and I am here today with my very special guest, Bob Barrenger, and we met at the Biohacking Conference just a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
So first off, I apologize for the delay. This is the thing about live feeds.
Right.
Technical difficulties. We live in LA. Well, I live in LA. You're visiting from DC. Things get a little crazy. So for everybody out there that's been waiting on the edge of their seat for this next episode, actually this is episode number 9.
Perfect.
So 9, the number of completion. You know about numerology?
Yes.
Yeah, you know about it.
There's a reason we're here together.
If you don't know anything about this gentleman, I'm actually wondering if I'm actually getting mentioned. This might be the only time I get a chance to talk for the whole hour, because I know the information, we get you started and you're just everybody sits there and just listens.
Okay.
So there's so much interesting information. A couple things before we get started. First of all, the woman that was supposed to be on with us, Molly, she had something come up earlier, so she is going to be on another episode. And so as I'm just returning back from Joshua Tree, I was at a gathering called Portal to the New Earth.
So cool.
And people say, oh, is it a festival? No. It's a portal to the new earth. Like, literally.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, literally. And actually, I'd love to plug Carlos Reyes at his store. I got this I'm one of, this is only 3 ever made. He owns one, his partner owns one, and this is the one. So, Carlos, if you're watching, love the shirt, and Facebook Live, please go to Art Effects in Yucca Valley, and some of the coolest stuff around. And he lives in Bali for 4 months out of the year, creates all this stuff. So this is from you, Carlos. Thank you so much. But about the portal.
Yes.
I went 2 years ago, and this gentleman, Harlan Emil, he creates sacred geometry, and he creates portals. That's what he does, and he's been involved with Burning Man and a lot of festivals, and he builds all these really amazing structures based off of sacred geometry. And there's a place called Gar's Boulder Gardens. Have you been to
Joshua Tree? A little bit, but not to Boulder Gardens.
So, I don't know how long Gar's been living there, but it's this amazing boulder garden. I don't know, these huge boulders, and they've been hosting this gathering called Portal to the New Earth. I went to it 2 years ago, and then they took last year off, and now I went back, and I hosted a live sound healing excursion. It's called Sonic Alchemy Journey. And we activate portals, and it's all with frequency and programming and indigenous instruments, and we set the field in a portal.
Wow.
And then I also did a workshop, just discussing about quantum physiology and signatures, a lot of things that we're probably going to talk about. And then we hosted something called the Vibra Dome, which is a sacred geometry space where we set up my technology inside using sound, light, frequency, and vibration, and they're interdimensional portals.
Nice.
And we've been bringing these to a lot of events lately. And in fact, if I could just recap for you real quickly, what I've seen. Facebook Live, we started a little bit late, a little bit frazzled. I really wanted to catch up with my friend Bob here. We've been kind of messaging each other for the last month since Biohacking Conference. And so this is it. This is our catch up, and it's on live Facebook streaming.
Perfect.
So
what better way?
Yeah, this is what's happening. But I wanted to share with you, we had, since the Biohacking Conference, I went immediately to Coachella, where we hosted a large private party at this mansion, and it's called the Unexpected Party. Just the first night there alone, there was 4,000 people.
Wow.
And we had 4 of our vibe zones set up. And what's so interesting about that is the right people find the zone.
Yes.
Because it's based off of frequency and resonance.
Yes.
And so we went there, and then the last week we were in San Diego, and I presented at it's called the Brain Summit, and it was a small intimate gathering. I'm not sure, maybe 6 doctors presented throughout the weekend at a private residence, and there was probably about 40 people there, and we were all really cutting edge doctors presenting on the brain trauma, neurodegenerative conditions, advanced technologies,
right.
and I spoke on accessing cellular memory. It was really fascinating. And then literally I did a wash and took off to Joshua Tree for this portal to the new earth,
Right.
and got back today about 4 o'clock.
Right.
And now I'm here with you for this Epic Vibe show, and that's what I've been doing for the last month.
Yes.
And what have you been doing for the last month?
It's been really amazing.
Yeah.
One miracle after the next. We left the Bulletproof Biohacking Conference, went down and spent some time in San Diego with my patent attorney.
Okay.
It's really, really cool tech that I can share with you a little bit later on. And we went from there and hung out with kind of one of the CIA's master trainers at one of the schools of mysticism. So pretty kind of wild experience.
Okay.
And so it was in kind of the Phoenix area.
Okay.
And we went to a 3-day intensive training class.
What's it called?
So this one was called Psi. And so
I've heard of Psi.
right, so kind of like Landmark, except
Yeah.
a little bit different.
I've heard.
right?
I'm familiar with Psi. And one question before we
Yes.
go forward.
Yeah.
Why don't you share with us a little bit about you and your background,
Sure.
and your epicness for being on the Epic Vibe show. And anybody that's watching has been watching all the different episodes. I'm actually getting really impressed with myself because we're bringing on epic people on the Epic Vibe show, and they keep getting better and better from week to week. And it just started with me doing a show. I wanted to talk about my technology, and I was like, well, who am I going to bring on? And so I brought on people that were really close to me, who I thought was most epic, which were some of my core team members.
Yeah.
And that evolved, and then we started doing these conferences and meeting cool people. I was like, I should really be inviting these people.
Yes.
And even today, when Molly had to do a last-minute cancellation, I reached out to you, and I reached out to a couple of people, and they all got back to me and were like, yes, we want to do it.
Right.
And so it's amazing that we don't have a shortage of epic people.
Amen.
But why don't you share a little bit about who you are and your epicness for being on my show,
Absolutely.
which I'm excited to have you on.
Right. So what I love about your Vibe Tech, right? So this is part of my history and background. So we'll just kind of go in kind of quick succession. So I started working when I was 5. I scored out of high school at 9. Started working full-time at 10. I started my first company at 13. I've had my same company now, same 800 number for 31 years.
Oh, wow.
And so
1-800.
960-2469.
Does that spell anything?
No. It's the number that we got. And so back in the day when I was like 13, right, I got a SkyTel pager.
Okay.
and it's kind of morphed into a complete call center software solution.
So you could call yourself a savant? You graduated because you graduated high school at 9. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So some of this, I think, if you look at kind of a product of certain select traumas that I decided to go through on purpose. And so a lot of good healing opportunities. When I wasn't working, I was actually going out and spending time with like a DARE program. And so I got like the DARE, like the Keep Kids Off Drugs program.
Oh, DARE, okay.
Yeah. And so I went through and spoke to 1.6 million school students by the time that I was 16.
Oh,
And
wow.
so for and during that time, got to work with some really, really great sound engineers. Even got to work with the guys who produced the old kind of Star Trek sci-fi show called Babylon 5. So I got to work with the guys that had hacked into the Amiga toasters and were doing 3D rendering and modeling back then for television.
What year was that?
Late 80s, early 90s.
I think it's incredible. Like, I was just reviewing, I was talking to somebody about my technology and like, the evolution of it. And prior to the Vibe systems I'm working with, and even working with vibroacoustics, which I had like kind of the download to do that in 2009, But prior to that, I developed a biofeedback system that came out in 2010, but I had a prototype that came out in 2007.
Nice.
And I was showing this to my girlfriend because I actually was rummaging through and I found the prototype. And so you're talking about the 80s.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But this is 2007.
Yes.
Which, I mean, doesn't seem that long ago,
Right.
but like there wasn't tablets in 2007.
Yes.
So if you're in the 70s, and then actually at this brain conference, I was talking with a gentleman that was in the early days of working with biofeedback systems, and he was talking about like in the early days of these biofeedback in the 80s.
Yes.
You know, and it was all dot matrix and all kinds of crazy stuff, and they're like doing healings. You know, like it's incredible.
That was one of my mentors. So his name was Gary Kirschman. So
Okay.
like a super epic fellow. He was at Berkeley before LSD wasn't illegal, right? And so he has got interesting stories there. But he wound up building geodesic domes and putting trampolines on the inside, and then doing like 18-channel surround sound inside of the geodesic domes. He was hanging out with Barry Oster, and they were doing soul music at the time. It's the same kind of music that they put in the sunlight and saunas nowadays.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so to go through and those.
I'm still stuck on the geodesic domes and the trampolines.
Oh yeah, so you want to talk about like some radical reverberation and some
Yeah.
cool high fives? So really awesome stuff, and a lot of what it is that you're doing. So they had a lot of people that were having sound healings.
What part of where was this in the world?
Well, they moved from kind of Mount Shasta, kind of
Okay.
North Berkeley kind of area,
Okay.
down to Texas. And so they were in and around Houston, and that's where Barry was at for a long time. And so when they put people on the trampolines in the middle of these geodesic domes, the vibrations would be able to roll through the people in a suspended state, almost kind of like a float tank or a virtual float tank without having to get wet.
See, so I'm a big proponent of floating.
Yes.
But there's just there's like practical things. Like
Yes.
You have to get out of your clothes.
Yes, right, yeah.
And you're floating,
Uh-huh.
and then there's cleanliness of
Yes,
the water and
yes.
ozonization, and you got to come out and you shower, and it's a great experience. But there's like, if you only do the hour,
Yes.
it's probably about 2 hours.
Right.
You know, maybe
Yes.
an hour and a half.
Absolutely.
And if you're rushing through, that kind of defeats the purpose of the float.
Well, to me, this is why that someone like you should have made the technology that you did, and what makes it special that you're delivering this to the world.
One of my dear friends and one of my biggest clients his name is Nick Janicki, and he owns True Rest Float Spas. I think he said he owns a third. He said that True Rest represents like a third of the global market or something.
Wow.
That could be wrong, but I think that's right. I think that's a correct statement. He's super into this technology, and he's into a lot of these different things, and it's interesting to really, but he's a little bit of, he's a visionary. He's not
Yes.
a little bit, he's a visionary, because
Sure.
not everybody is in alignment with that kind of
Sure.
integration. And people ask me, so I say in my work, I said it's like, it's the opposite of sensory deprivation. It's hypersensory stimulation, but
Yes.
it takes you to the same place.
Yes.
One other thing, just sit up straight. I just want to make sure that you're in the
In the
frame.
frame?
Yeah. Is everything good?
Okay, we're both in.
Okay, good.
Very good.
Just checking. I don't want to be like, oh yeah, we didn't see that the whole time.
Okay, very good.
So continue.
So eventually, I wound up competing in national drama competitions, running commercial sound at there's a really cool place called the Summit in Houston, Texas, and so probably 70,000 people, and I was able to set up sound there. So I was doing some pretty interesting things with energy, frequency, and vibration, and even more recently, kind of flash forward, I was hanging out with the world record holder. His name's Captain Kurt Kowalski.
For what?
And so actually he did a 1,003-pound ass to grass squat for IDFF.
How much?
1,003 pounds. Just kind of put this into kind of proportion. And Marty Gallagher coached him. He's also one of the men's health editors for several decades. And I believe Marty has 6 world records of his own.
Wow.
Okay, so these are some pretty epic guys. And the prior world record before Captain Kurt Kowalski was like 726 pounds approximately. And that was set like 50 years ago. And then Captain Kurt Kowalski came out, and he didn't go like, hey, 726 to 800. He went from 726 to 1003.
Well, that's what I was saying. That's what
this is a
yeah.
huge bit. Now, what's interesting is that we introduced Captain Kirk Kowalski to the new comm device that Dave Asprey had at his chip, right?
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because as these world record holders getting introduced to these binaural beats, like he said it in a very kind of eloquent in a way that you would expect for a big guy to be able to say it. He said sometimes you just got to shake that shit off. And it was really interesting that as all of this new kind of binaural beat technology was being used to rewire and reintegrate his brain and also for a lot of other people and bringing us into new states, that all of that was, well, sometime to move into the new state, you got to let the old state go away.
Yeah, I mean, you got to empty the bucket before you can fill it.
Bingo. And this is what I understand that you're doing here, which I think is really epic.
Well, thank you.
And so,
you know what, I wanted to share, I spent my entire professional career, clinical professional career, in Denver, Colorado.
okay.
I spent 99% of my professional career in Denver, Colorado, for accuracy purposes. I did like 6 months in Philadelphia before I moved to there. But one of the epic experiences that I have in my journeys there with my music, I still am stuck on the geodesic dome with the trampoline.
Yeah, we'll go back.
So yeah,
we can totally talk about these things.
But I think what's interesting is because it comes back to geodesic dome.
Yes.
And it comes back to the sacred geometry of the dome.
Yes.
And so the mathematics that I work with my music is the mathematics of the connective tissue, which is the same mathematics of the geodesic dome.
Yes, of course.
So
strongest structures on the planet.
Yeah, you're saying of course, and I say of course.
Yes.
But sometimes I've been realizing that my of course and your of course is not everybody else's of course.
Well, that's why we're inviting everybody else to be
Yeah,
part of it.
and I think that's interesting because I sometimes there's a lot of people say stuff to me and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so anyhow, in this particular situation, what I liked so much about Colorado was it was just a playground for me, and the fact that it was just this space of wonderment. Because what I did have was I had a lot of clinical experience. Like I specialize in chronic degenerative conditions and allergies and autoimmune diseases and people that just don't get better. And since day one, almost day one, in 2000, I ended up working with using vibrational techniques and then technologies, and they worked. And so my mind would always be like, well, if this works, why can't I do this? And if that works, why can't I do that?
Bingo.
And it just kind of go down the path. And I ended up doing a training. I did a retreat. It was called Adventures in Transformation Weekend. And I did this. I've spoken about this on the show before. But what was interesting about doing this particular, I talked about the science of transformation, and I did this kind of 45-minute sound journey, which was the first time I did it, which is what I did at Portal to the New Earth. So I've evolved it over the years. But interesting about it was I met this gentleman, Daniel Donovan, aka Techno Shaman, if you happen to be following it, and he was kind of a conscious DJ, and he invited me to do these things called shamanic booms, which were like these monthly kind of festival gatherings. It was awesome, and I never really went to any festivals before. But he was like, we need to hang out, and you can this was generation one, so my technology, they're called Vibe, vibrational sound therapy systems. They're called the Vibe 3.1 and 3.2, the 3.0 series. When I started working with vibrational resonance, this was my 1.0. And then my last company, that was 2.0, and now we're in 3.0. So this was my 1.0. It was from a mentor that I was selling for him, but I would bring them and I made music for him. And we would set up the thing, and you can do anything you want. So I would say to him, can I do this? And he'd be like, yes. and he would give me like the opening ceremony or whatever it is. So in this story that I'm sharing with you, there was these one-night festivals. That's what they were. And this turned into his first weekend festival, like the first thing. And it was a very tribe, I don't know, maybe 100, 150 people. Cool. Probably about the size of Portal to the New Earth. It was under 200 people. And we all knew each other. And Colorado weather is usually very nice. For this particular weekend, starting Thursday on load-in day, dumping rain, like horrendous. It was like a hurricane.
Oh, wow.
And so we're loading in, and it's a mud bath, and everybody's setting up, and we're all excited, and we're doing it, and we're setting up Fridays, wash out. Saturday, and everybody's making the best of it. And I had a workshop Saturday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and by Saturday 1 o'clock afternoon, everybody's kind of hanging out in their tents, and it's kind of, I don't want to say it was lame, but it was not the best festival I've ever been at.
Sure.
And I was like, nobody's going to come to my talk, And I went in, and the main stage was set up in a geodesic dome.
Oh, wow.
And that was the main stage. And I started doing this whole thing on sacred geometry and shamanism, on the history of shamanism. And then I said, let's do, and I started playing my music, energy clearing. And I said to them, and it was 11 people in the room, which I thought was a special number.
Yeah.
There was 11 people that showed up. We were in this geodesic dome, and I said, let's set our intention for not just clearing negative energy out of our nervous system space and dwellings in ourselves, but let's set the intention to clear the energy out of this festival.
Wow.
And I just played the music. And within a few minutes, the rain stopped. The sun came out.
Yes.
And all I remember hearing is the roar of the entire festival. Everybody just starts screaming. And I looked down on the face of some of the people, and they started they were smiling.
Yeah.
And it was over, and people came up and were like, dude, your music changed the weather.
Yes.
I need to add a caveat to the story, because it sounds kind of crazy about me sharing that story with you. But I was telling this, a couple of years ago, I met this girl at a Tony Robbins event,
Right.
and I was like, I'm going to Desert Hearts, which is another music festival here in California, and she's like, oh, I want to come. So her and I, we run off to Desert Hearts together, and I'm sharing, and we're having a good time, and I'm telling her this story, this exact story, and we're at this elixir bar, and we're having this elixir, and the guy serves me the elixir. He said, I just want to validate that story, because I was one of those 11 people.
Oh, wow.
And that elixir bar was a Colorado bar.
Nice.
Yes. So it really happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as a logical man, I said to myself, why did that happen? It was quote unquote a miracle.
Yes.
And I can tell you, in my lifetime, I have personally witnessed that experience, but I've also witnessed 2 other experiences where I was in a place where I saw weather change.
Yes.
Maybe 4 now I think about it, but one was, have you ever heard of Michael Franti?
Yes.
So, have you ever seen Michael Franti?
No.
This was the first time I ever saw Michael Franti, and what they call his music, they refer to his music as hippie hop.
Okay.
Like hip hop,
Yeah.
but it's like hippie hop.
Right, okay, yeah.
And it kind of, that's a really great term for it. It's like jam band, very conscious. He's kind of a shaman. Like you can tell by his energy.
Right.
And he has very conscious, very planetary, elevating lyrics.
Right.
And I had never heard of him before when I first moved to Colorado back in 1999. And it just was within the first 6 months, and I was down in Taos. I was just out on a little sacred journey. And I had a friend of mine, she was like, oh my God, Michael Franti's playing this festival, we need to go. And we went, and it was this tiny, renewable energy festival in Taos. I mean, and he was the headliner, and I had never heard of him before. But once again, it wasn't raining. It was fine. It was completely not raining. And he starts singing this song, and he's like, cool water is coming down all over me. And he just started singing it over again. And it started raining.
With cool water.
Yeah. And everybody was looking at each other, and then and it was dumping rain. It was crazy.
Yeah.
It was dumping rain, and then the whole crowd was we were all singing it, and in this rain, and it was going on. And then the magical part of it was that he literally stopped singing. And immediately it stopped raining.
Yes.
And then everybody was just looking, and it was we just saw that.
Yes.
We just witnessed that.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So anyhow, that was really popular. The only other one, which I'll make it super quick, was I was in college and I saw Pink Floyd.
Yes.
And they brought in like this really ominous weather. And I remember when it was over, like the weather cleared out, and the radio station DJs, they said, you know you're badass when you bring your own weather.
Yes.
And Pink Floyd's like that. So those are the 3 times I saw.
Absolutely. Well, this goes back to quantum physics,
Yeah.
quantum science, quantum mechanics, right?
Exactly.
So are we an effect from our weather, or do we, as part of the universe, affect our weather? I think it just depends on how much that we're tapped in, tuned in, and turned on, and really connected with our environment.
Exactly.
And so clearly you've been doing some really amazing things.
Well, I think really what comes down to it was what I noticed about Energy Clearing, my first album,
Yes.
which total whim, open to source. I had an idea. Who I produced the album with, he's a friend of mine. We've done healing work together. We've done some sacred journeys together. And I said, do you have any health issues? And he said, I started dating this girl with a cat, and I'm definitely allergic to cats. And I wanted to run an experiment where I was using these little energy vials, and I converted them into audio files, just as an experiment.
Yeah.
And we recreated my cat allergy protocol in his recording studio, and I treated him for a very severe cat allergy. 18 of 22 allergens he was allergic to. And I treated him, and long story short, 4 sessions later, they're resolved.
Oh, that's really cool.
It was super cool.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, wow, we can embed like frequencies into music.
Yes.
And so we went in and recorded Energy Clearing. And what you think you do, and then you start bringing it out to the field, what I kind of feel that Energy Clearing does is, well, it clears negative energy out of your nervous system space and dwelling, but I feel it creates a vacuum. It like, because you remove something, something has to come in.
Yes.
So I would use it actually when I'm doing like promotions, when I'm doing, when I be at the farmer's market, or if I just needed to kind of clear space out of like, instead of like sonic incense.
Yes.
And everybody would come in, like you clear the space, and people
That's cool.
come in. I started noticing that. And I use very specific, I work with like the phi ratio embedded in the music,
Right.
which is also the same geometrical, of the geodesic dome.
Yeah.
So and then our bodies are the phi ratio.
Yes.
So if we're harmonizing the phi ratio in our phi ratio,
Right.
and it's amplified, and essentially a geodesic dome, we're creating a vortex,
Right.
and we align all those things,
Sure.
it's going to harmonize dissonance.
Right.
And in this particular case, it moved pressure
Sure.
and weather. And it's Colorado. The weather changes.
Yeah. That's really cool.
So that's what I theorize happened.
That's awesome. Well, and clearly you have witnesses and people that are validating that, right? That's really, really cool.
We can move on from the geodesic dome.
No, actually, I'm really digging what you're doing with sound and with energy and frequency and vibration. And you brought up to my kind of particular memory about cymatics.
Yeah.
And really, really cool. If you guys haven't taken a look at cymatics, I know that Facebook's got a very diverse population and probably a lot of fans of your show, but also maybe some new people. They did an experiment where they went through and they put a specific frequency to a plate.
Yeah.
And they put on either sand or salt. And it was a trip. It said as they go through and start raising the amplitude of this vibration, I would expect, just me, based on what I've seen happen in normal physics, is that eventually things would vibrate off and the salt or the sand would just eventually, wind up on the floor.
Yeah.
But instead, cymatics actually shows how each different frequency will auto-arrange,
Yeah.
the salt or the sand in its own formation.
Yeah.
And that really tells us something different than any form of physics that I've ever studied or understood in the past.
We've talked about cymatics a lot on the show. In fact, the last 2 weeks, we've had international DJs that played like Ibiza and Berlin and Miami and and they're all recording in 432.
Oh.
And they're all very much into like the healing effects of sound.
Huge.
And they're all very much into it. So we talked about cymatics. So some interesting things about cymatics is when we're looking at these things is actually what you see in the sand is actually like the blank space is the sound.
Yes.
And then it kind of culminates, gets pushed into these sacred geometry, And really what they show is those geometrical shapes arrange in 432 tuning.
That's very cool.
And so my favorite cymatic video, and if you haven't seen this, and I encourage you, just Google Jaguar cymatics.
Okay.
The car Jaguar.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'd really love to get sponsored by Jaguar for this exact reason. Yeah. So Jaguar, if you're listening, I think like Dr. Vibe can do this because they have the best. And I think about marketing, okay?
Sure.
So I was like, it's the coolest advertisement I've ever seen. But for them to do this, like, who's their target market? Like, are they?
100%.
Like, I mean, are like? Because what I got from it, I mean, I would buy a Jaguar because basically that commercial, it says that as they tune their engine to specific harmonics that create this geometry. And so as you're going down the freeway, that's what's coming out of the exhaust. That's the car that I want to be driving.
But let's just upgrade that for a second, right? Okay, so I got one of my buddies is a linguist over in Iraq right now, and they did this local shoot about this new most expensive SUV on the planet. I think it's a Rolls-Royce SUV.
Okay.
And so really it's an interesting vehicle, but in the back seat they have the surround like the blackout curtains and stuff like that. You push a button and the curtain comes on. And they have this, I think it's
flux capacitor?
Kind of, right? So they got a blonde, right? So I think it's like a blonde sports car, supercar babe something. It's sort of like her hashtag, call sign, whatever. But she goes and she sits in the back, and the doors actually open up from the inside out.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And then they go in the back, and they've got this nice decanter fridge, and then they've got the two chairs, and they both vibrate.
Oh.
Okay, and so they're massage vibrating chairs. And so, but for me, like an upgrade would be not only would a Jaguar in the future do all of its cool stuff on the outside, but on the inside, in the back, you would have not only these massaging vibrating, but you'd also have your tech, right?
Yeah,
so then you could
people are now please continue.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I mean, if you look at, hey, not only should Jaguar sponsor, but what if Jaguar actually licensed your tech to be able to upgrade their cars so that you could have a radical harmonic experience inside as well as outside?
I mean, people have been coming to me for that, and Jaguar has not come. I haven't got any contracts for that yet.
Sure. Well, just watch them just leap around Rolls-Royce,
Yeah.
with your tech.
Well, whatever it is, and I think about it like, I don't know. I would have to assume I don't know why they haven't already done it.
Well, let's make some phone calls.
Yeah. So I think I tend to downgrade the technology because like I had one of my I'm not sure how much of this I can really talk about, but one of my clients, she's a major investor in a global autonomous electric busing company.
Awesome.
And she was one of my original pre-sale owners.
Okay.
And she's a potential investor for me. In fact, she really was. But she says to me, we'd like to put these on these autonomous buses.
Sure.
Because like, what are they doing? And the buses are really cool. So it's funny. So I went to their party here. I think they may be. They're not based at LA. In fact, from the party, it was a Argentinian barbecue party at a fancy mansion up in California. So I wonder if the company is actually Argentine. I know that the founders are Argentinian.
Okay.
But it's funny because they call me Dr. Vibe. And I sound I was like, that's my tour bus.
Yes.
It's like the electric, autonomous, badass bus.
Yes, there you go.
Right. And we all have
wherever
vibrations.
Goes, it's going to be
that would be super cool.
Right.
Like they have these pictures of what these things are going to look like.
Right.
So that would be really amazing. But yeah, I think about a lot of things like if we were going to bring it in, because I don't really think it's my tech that is what's special. I feel it's the software.
Okay.
I think it's like, okay, so you can put transducers in it and the seat vibrates.
Yes.
But what are you going to do? How is it going to vibrate? Like the Rolls Royce. Like,
there's the artist, right?
Yeah. Like, okay, so here's your massage chairs. You're in the back, and this feels so good. Like I've been in some amazing massage chairs, where you're getting, you got the compression.
Yes.
They're the best.
Right. But we
But
can do
here,
better.
next level, like, in like,
Well,
what
how
are
about
what
the
are
chair that
things-
makes you smarter, right? So when we start looking at some of this stuff, so Dave Asprey went to go to BioCybernaut like 4 times.
Yeah,
right? So it's
BioCybernaut.
that's like a $100,000 investment. Tony Robbins did the same thing, right? So he rented out for him, his wife, and their assistant, and closed the place down. I got to go and experience the same type of thing with Dr. Hart. And so what was interesting is there's me and another guy from Poland. He was a business owner. I'll tell you the story later, but they baseline us, and I roll in on Dr. Hart's equipment. This is the same tech out of UC Berkeley at 568 microvolts of alpha, and the other guy at 1800. In 3 days, we both tripled. So I went to over 1800, and this guy went to over 4300 microvolts of alpha. What's really wild is
So it's like neurofeedback on steroids.
yes. And so we're doing 12 hours a day of intense.
12 hours.
Yeah, for 7 days straight, right? So within 3 days, I'm tracking like a dude who had been meditating, like a Zen monk for 25 years. Then 4 days, I was over 40 years of the same kind of exact brain mapping. So more than 40 years of Zen within 4 days. And then I continue to go beyond where the maps don't end. And so that was really interesting.
That is interesting.
But what was more revolutionary for me was the understanding of how that as we open up our heart with all the magnetism, all our mitochondrial density, that actually that our heart opening allows for our brain to function better. And more interesting than that was that as we enter into a situation where we do some neural feedback, and actually my hair's a little bit goofy because I came back from doing a QEEG with Dr. Hill from UCLA.
Oh.
So he runs the Peak Brain Institute here locally in Culver City.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. So
I'd like to connect with them.
Absolutely.
Were you guys there? Was that where you guys were before
so
here?
this is part of our journey throughout
Okay.
today. And then what was really cool is so before and after I do any biohack, I'll go do a QEEG, then I'll do a radical biohack, and then I'll see how it affects my brain and then also my body. So when you start looking at like the next levels,
Yeah.
like Samson, the Incredible Hulk, Hercules, these guys are doing some really amazing sound-like things. So talking like not
Wait,
just
what are you
gamma,
doing?
yeah,
You
like think about like the story of the Incredible Hulk.
Incredible
right?
Hulk, okay.
Okay, the Incredible Hulk, he gets exposed to
David Banner.
Yes, well, David Banner gets exposed to gamma radiation.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is that we can do gamma radiation not with just a deteriorating or radiating thing. We can do this also with sound.
Yeah.
And so when we start talking about
The
how
gamma
we
waves.
right. So now we start talking about carrier waves and entrainment,
Yeah.
and this is how we predicate all of the transducers that we're talking about. There's the magic. So I've been working with some guys that actually retrain brains
Yeah.
so that we can actually increase. So for me, before I started biohacking, I was getting 13 minutes of deep sleep every night.
Oh.
Now I get 2.5 hours
But
of deep
what are,
sleep.
you're saying
unassisted.
biohacking, but like, what are your biohacking modalities?
Oh, so there's some really cool modalities, and there's some really cool algorithms that run, some math that run our universe and that run our bodies.
Yeah.
And so, but before we get off on those, specifically speaking with, hey, what's really cool about what you're doing is that your software, the way that you're mixing your sound, actually has the potential to stimulate something called neurogenesis.
Yeah.
Any genesis is good genesis, right?
Sure.
So we get cryogenesis, thermogenesis, neurogenesis, and every time that we get to a place of building new connections in our neurotransmitters, and we can do this while we're laying in the chair that you have, we can do this while we're listening to the software, the way you mix your music, we can do this when we're up listening to your music on the dance floor, and actually building new neural motor pathways throughout our entire body and then reintegrating for a deeper embodied experience. And so you're really on the cutting edge of human evolution and where we're learning to be better together. And so I thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you for sharing that. I came out of we were in the portal the last couple of days.
There you go. And now you get to come out to the New Earth.
Yeah, portal to New Earth. And it's. I spent 2 years on the festival circuit with my old company.
Okay.
And now I'm very much, and I met amazing people. And what I like about all these festivals is it's a blank slate, and everybody's really into it.
Yeah.
And I met a lot of quote unquote target markets, but at the end of the day, everybody connects. And I just was reflecting back as you're saying that about, well, a lot of things were going through my mind, was about like my workshop that I did. And it was, I mean, this was a small gathering, maybe like under 200 people.
Yes.
Quality over quantity, for sure.
Huge.
And we had a good amount of people for the first, when I did the sound, they're called sound alchemy jerseys. And we had basically it was packed, for that. We did it at the main amphitheater. And we just played frequencies, and really my intention was, how do I layer frequencies in a vortex for activating a portal to the new earth? And then I did a workshop, and I was just people really want to know, like, on the left brain, like, who are you, and what are you doing, and how are you doing this? And we talked about my mom and her health issues and little things like that. And I think, like, I just feel like there's some people that kind of grow up in the fact, like, oh, you're a genius. And then you have other people that are that same person, but you grew up and they tell you that you're learning disabled. And there's like this whole like you graduated high school at 9.
Yes.
Like for me, I was being held back at 9.
Yes.
And it's the same.
Right.
What would happen if I had that time back, or is everything perfect just the way it is? And I think it's just perfect the way it is.
It's a miracle, right? And then being able to go back and to be able to talk to that younger version of us and tell the younger version of us it was okay. There's actually a place, and I didn't really share this story. So there's a place that I work with in the federal government called NICO, and they teach all kinds of really cool stuff, like neural feedback, they teach Reiki, they teach timeline therapy, and they teach some pretty fantastic stuff.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the government. I mean, of course they're using these things.
Right. And so
which is kind of scary.
Well, but
what's the intention behind it, right?
I think that when we begin to look at where we're actually at, I've been able to work with some really cool people that understand that sound heals, and that also that sound can, if you look at binaural beats or solfeggio, right? I've got some really cool tracks with solfeggio, and actually, remember I show up at this brain gym, right? And I'm at 568 microvolts of alpha. And what's interesting about alpha wave frequency, and this is what's important for what you're doing, UC Berkeley and Dr. Hart found out with them and some guys before President Reagan became the president at the time, is that you have a 27-year-old young person, and if they got low on alpha, then they would die at 27. And that's interesting.
Huh.
And now you go through. Now this is where young people, like I think the statistic is that if you're like 8 years old or younger, you spend at least 80% of your time in alpha. That's the brainwave state. And what's really cool about what you're doing in entrainment, what you're doing in helping people with these frequencies, is we're being able to let go of the old earth, their old way. And if you let go of that, and you get fully embodied, you get fully enraptured, enthralled with the music that you're playing, we recreate some brand new neural connections, then you can step out of that old reality and into a new reality.
New dimension of your choosing. Dimensional shifting.
Huge. It doesn't have the trauma. It doesn't have the problems. It doesn't have the things that used to hold us back, right? And so I think that there used to be this story about this guy Jesus, right? Jesus said, "Hey, what happened in the past?" He said it's easier for the camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich person. And I'm going to tell you, I think they wrote it wrong. What I believe is it was a person with attachment. Like if you're held on to any form of trauma or any form of belief, well, then you get to be stuck there. But if you're willing to just let go of that, or touch it with love, or thank you for the experience, and we get a chance to let go and slide into any version or reality frame that we choose. And that's what's really a miracle. So I love that your music allows people to rewire their brains. And here's the map.
See, I'd like to actually interject. I don't think it's rewiring the brains. It's rewiring your nervous system.
That's even better.
Which is
because that's
the brain is simply the relay station.
Yes.
Like it's the interaction between all the connections. But I talk about in my book. I refer to it as the new nervous system.
Yes.
But actually, I think I rewrote. I think I miswrote that because it's not the new nervous system. It's actually the true nervous system.
We're talking primordial nervous system.
Yeah, this is
right?
the interaction.
Which is way below, like my subconscious speaks like a 3-year-old. My central nervous system speaks even kind of at a lesser degree. And for us, actually, There's a guy who did some neural feedback training.
Yeah.
He holds the world record in gamma, the same stuff we're talking about in the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and I met him.
Hang out with those world record.
Yeah, well, with record holders, right? I mean, like who else? Like, we gotta hang out with epic people, right? So I hang out with more world record holders per capita than probably anybody else that I know.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So
That
I got
sounds
a
like
guy
a
with
good podcast.
26 world
You
record
could do
holders.
it. You could do a great show.
Yeah, but right now, this is your show about your cool stuff,
well,
right?
we're doing it. It's our show.
Yeah, so actually one of the guys that I studied with has 26 world records. Another guy has 6, another guy has 1. Another guy that I love, man, this dude's like a walking wall. He's lifted 1,000 pounds more than any other person on the planet. Routinely, this guy lifts 1,293 pounds. And how do they do this? It's really interesting.
Yeah.
They actually do something called exercise-induced altered states. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So if we look at consciousness over mind, and mind over matter, and if you don't mind, it doesn't matter. Bingo. So, but you got to go through and you got to respect physics, right? So you want to make sure you've got right bone support, right postural support, that we've established a neuromotor pathway, that we've built the neuromotor pathway. The next step is we recruit large motor neurons, the heavy lifters, and then we can shove a ton of electricity through the human body. Now that's really super cool. Part of this process is learning how to be able to dance and communicate. The sound that you're doing teaches a human body at its central nervous system, at its subconscious, at its conscious, at its superconscious level, how to begin to speak in a better way. And the map that's over there at UC Berkeley says every single time that we chill our brain out, okay, so Sophagia will do that, we'll go through and wear our brain out, and then we calm down, kind of like we power shift a sports car. So we calm our brain down and we develop a new connection through the corpus callosum. It's only one small part that connects both hemispheres.
Yep.
And every time we get to thread the needle, we get more than 10x, and actually more than 100x in new awareness, new bandwidth potential. So what's really cool is what you were saying earlier about, hey, so we go through and we clear the space and then we fill it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, when we go through and we create a place where both the left and right side chill out and get into harmony and are grooving the same music that you're putting out, the cool tunes, well, people are getting smarter because of what you're doing.
Theoretically. Yeah,
Well, here's what's cool. So I would say theoretically.
Actually, I'm going to take that back. Yeah, I mean,
Just own how epic you are.
Thank you. What I would like to actually add to that, though,
Yes.
and as a correction, is it's not the central nervous system. It's the living connective tissue matrix.
Yes.
That feeds into the peripheral. That feeds into the central nervous system.
I know.
Well, I know
You've been waiting to say this, right?
I know you.
So now
I know you.
You keep educating your audience.
Yeah,
This is great.
I know you. But
Just listen, folks. There's a lot more where this came from.
well, no, but I think that's where the recruitment comes in.
Huge.
And that's where we're holding all the traumas. Like, I love that saying, you know, the issues are in the tissues.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, and you know, I mean,
You can do myofascial release with John F. Barnes, or you can just listen to some cool tracks that you put down.
the last thing that I did today, before my girlfriend and I left the portal, was there's a dear friend of mine. His name is Machu.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a didgeridoo player, and I play the didgeridoo.
Yeah.
And Machu's somebody that I want to go and drop in and do like a week-long dig intensive with this guy.
Why don't we go down to freaking Australia, man?
Well, I want to do that too.
So I lived in Darwin for a while, and man, the Aboriginal, the indigenous people, they can play some dig.
Well, that's actually, I feel like that's been coming in.
Okay.
So right before we left, I was saying goodbye to him, and he says, "Please let me, let me."
That sound good or something?
Yeah, give me some of that. And I was like, "Well, how do you want me?" He goes, "What do you mean? You know how to do this?" Like, whatever you want. So we sit down, and he starts playing, and he's having this epic experience. And all of a sudden, and I feel like this sound laser literally going through very specific parts of my body, but all of a sudden I start having all of these really negative thoughts that I actually kind of set intention that I wanted, because my girlfriend, we're driving down, in Joshua Tree, and we're going there, and I knew we're about to lose service. And so as we see the signs, and we're driving in, we're on the approach, I was like, what's our intention for going into the portal? And she shares hers, and I share mine. And as I'm receiving this dig session, this healing session, all of this negative stuff is like coming up, and I just breathe and I let it go, and it's literally like the ditch is like resonating.
Yeah. Like the dross. Yeah, like they're just golden. So actually the process of refining gold,
Yeah.
okay, there's a dross that comes to the top.
Okay.
Right? And what's really cool
yeah.
is that as you scrape off all that dross, as you let that go, the purity of the gold within you, it begins to be more pure and shines much brighter.
It's like already.
Amen?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thank you for that metaphor. But you know what? The metaphors are illustrations of laws of nature.
Yes.
And it all applies, it's all the same.
Yes.
It's
When we
just
let
in
it
different
be,
dimensions.
yeah.
In different dimensions. So
that was kind of my big epiphany, right? So if we look at our human body as 72 to 90% water, and then if we look at going through and removing the bones, then we're 99% water. Okay, and we talk about biohacking, the basic stuff, other modalities. So if I'm 99% water, and if you're 99% water, and if between us is this thing called humidity, which is also water, okay?
Yeah.
Then in physics, there's no such thing as separation.
Yeah.
We good? And so that begins to change everything that I understood. And there's actually a really cool documentary without going too far afield, right? But the documentary is called The Moses Code. So,
I've heard of that.
So if we go back to the Torah, the penance of Islam, okay, we go back to any Abrahamic faith, and even what's wild is in Hindi, we go back to Sanskrit.
Yeah.
It's all the same. Now what's a trip is because I only speak English. I'm thinking probably a lot of people that are watching this stuff on Facebook probably speak English too. So here's the story that I grew up with. So Moses goes and talks to God, and he says, God, who should I tell them that you are? And God responds back with, I am. Now what's interesting is that Moses is like, hey, I don't think they're going to get that. I don't think that's enough. And then so he says, can you tell me a little more? So then God says, well, I am that I am.
Yeah.
And in English, what I heard was, I'm not going to tell you anything more. That's all you get. But actually in Hebrew, there's not really a use for a comma. Now in English, that's kind of a big deal. And I don't know any clean metaphors to share with why commas are important, but you guys can look it up on
It's a box.
Yeah, there's some interesting things, right? So what actually it says is, God says, well, actually, I am that, and then comma, and then I am. And really, it's interesting because first God says, well, I am non-duality, but if you force me to be, then I'll also be duality as well. Really, really interesting. It's also how our brains are formed. So if you look at the two hemispheres, right? So the two hemispheres divided, because when the two hemispheres are together, we can do anything. And so right now, the sound and the healing and the beds and what you're doing actually allows for us to be able to increase human potential by rewiring both hemispheres through the corpus callosum. And what's really interesting is that if we look at the hard science, you can use biofeedback devices and measure the amount of amplitude for energy within our brain and within our body, and every single time that we rewire, we get to have more potential. The potential. And that's exactly it. So you want to get younger, rewire your brain. You want to be healthier, rewire your brain. You want to overcome disease, rewire your brain. And so if we look at the human brain, kind of comes pre-wired with 6 partitions. So we got a reptile, a mammalianic, and an executive, right? And typically, like this is the walls of Jericho. So we got these partitions, and some people get sick. Some people wind up with schizophrenia. Some people go sideways, right? So you can have more fractures. If we're going to be real human beings, we want to remove those fractures. Because honestly, I thought that was going to be my takeaway. I'm going to validate the efficacy of brain training, neurofeedback. And worst case, I'm going to learn how to be the polygraph. That's my thought, right? Okay. And then I realized that as I started coming back together and rewiring my brain, that I didn't want to be the polygraph. I didn't want to fracture my brain. And I didn't even want the 3 partitions. So we started rewiring with sound to go around. So basically, and actually some of the stuff with Dr. Barrenger, he's doing some really amazing things with Wim Hof, right? And so I got a chance to go train with Wim. And so it's pretty wild what we've been seeing going on with Wim is that he gets into the freezing cold ice water with the minerals, with the biophotomodulation, with the chemical activation, with the hydration, you see healing. And part of that is we get the reptilian brain to scream, don't freeze us to death, right? Because we could die of hypothermia. And then the executive brain says, it's okay, there's 100 people here, and I'm only going to do it for 2 minutes, and you can't get hypothermia in 2 minutes. But what's interesting is that you can rewire we go from 6 partitions to 2 hemispheres, and from 2 hemispheres to 1 brain. and one brain to one body in parasympathetic, and then from one brain, one body to one mind. And when we do that, we can optimize the amount of bandwidth we have. So recent science shows us that if we stay in our prefrontal cortex, we can dial up bandwidth speeds. That's why we should never lean on our own understanding. We should never lean on our prefrontal cortex. As a matter of fact, if you move into flow state, like you want to catch an epic wave, being epic actually is reducing the amplitude, the use, the reliance upon the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
We actually flow with the mammal, we flow with the reptile, we flow with the heart, we flow with the gut.
Exactly.
We don't flow here, so we've got to move this one away. So we get here, this one, which is, we got dial up here, 20,000 events per second. Or if I get rid of the partitions, I get 4 million, so I get cable modem here. But then what's really cool is if we start tapping into the rest of this kind of interstitium of all the rest of this matrix of connective tissues and neurotransmitters, there's more inside of us, hundreds of trillions of connections, more than all the stars in the sky, and more than all of the sand and all the beaches for the whole world. So for us, the challenge of us becoming optimal humans is really reconnecting and rewiring, and your sound technology assists people in doing that. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for that exclamation. You know, what's been kind of ringing in my mind is about the gamma brainwaves.
Yes.
You know, we're talking about them, and everybody's familiar with the beta and the alpha and the theta and the delta. You know, those are like the standard ones.
Yes.
But then I'm like, well, what's up with the gamma?
Yes.
You know? And so with my new music I'm coming out with, I've really been wanting to create more gamma music.
Yes.
And so I started researching gamma brainwave states.
Yes.
And what I ascertained from it, because I started reading it, like, what creates a gamma wave? And they're saying that off the top of my head, I can't recall like but basically you're getting this lightning speed impulse from the occipital lobe to the frontal lobe at something like 120 times per second or something. I think those are the numbers for gamma. So I was like, well, how can I reproduce that into something like that I can put into my music? Then I started doing more research. So actually, I made some prototype brainwave.
Yeah,
I started fooling around with it. I had some ideas come in, and I started making some prototype stuff with that. But as I did more research, what I read was that theta induces gamma.
Yes.
So then I said to myself, do I even need to make gamma music? Because I'm already making theta music.
Right.
So if I induce like theta, am I creating gamma? So that's kind of where things have stopped for the moment for me as I'm going down this path of exploring gamma. So you were talking about that earlier.
So when we look at biofeedback, there's issues with biofeedback because our muscles produce gamma when they move. So typically neurofeedback practitioners have not had the amps, right? But the solution for that is noise cancellation. So we basically say we understand and we measure the skin response, and then therefore we cancel that out, and then we can get what's beyond the skin.
Yeah.
And so what's really cool is that yes, we can come in with a line driver, theta, alpha, some other originating signal, like the pings. So we basically say, hey, wake up human body.
Yeah.
Okay? And then you're going to have a gamma response to that. So you want to wake up and then you have a response. What's really cool, if you're going to play patty cake and you just went with one hand, it really doesn't do what you need to. Or if you're going to do a man's version, you're going to want to do like neural collies, so like the whole, yeah, right? No, I'm just saying, like, so like they've got around here in Marina Del Rey, right? Guru Dan Inosanto, who trained with Bruce Lee.
Okay.
And so now you're talking about guys who are doing cross-hemisphere stick work that establishes a new connection, and then you hit the other stick and you get an auditory response, okay? And you get a tactile response. So it's the fastest way. Huge.
You're making anchors.
Bingo, right? So here and then here right away. So this is a really cool way for us to rewire our brain. But if you were going to go through only do one-sided, it really wouldn't be as meaningful. So when we say, okay, we want to start with theta or with an alpha cue, and we go through and say, okay, now we start that process and we're going to expect, an action and a reaction. We really want to be able to look at cultivating and exercising gamma and respecting it. If we do that, we can wind up with the next next version of Samson, or the next version of the Incredible Hulk, or the next version of an X-Men, a superhero.
Yeah.
Right? This is beyond peak performance. So we look at biohacking from Dave Askren's, some of the stuff that he's doing. Hey, sure, we can live longer, but what I've found is that we can actually reverse our age. So for me, like, I've got QEEGs that show that I'm getting younger. I've got telomere reports that show that my telomeres are regrowing. I've got HRV reports that show that I'm getting younger. I've got Russian tech that says that I'm also getting younger. So there is a way for us to be able to scientifically prove that we can get younger. 6 months ago, well, yeah, 6 months ago I was like bald. Now I've got freaking hair. Doesn't look like I'm freaking bald now.
Right, yeah.
Right, and my hair is still filling out.
I'd like to see that picture.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited.
There was a patient, there was one of my practitioners when I was in Denver. He was a meditator.
Yes.
And he was bald.
Yeah.
And he said, I am doing an experiment with myself to see if I can regrow my hair.
Yes.
And, you know, over like 6 months, he was like, look, there's hair.
Yes.
You know, and I saw hair.
Yes. And
You
this,
know,
this is
and-
what's happening for me. And it's really cool because I grew up in a reality frame where that didn't happen. So for me, like, the miracle is, hey, I let go of the limiting beliefs that I have,
Yeah.
and I moved to a place where it was possible. So I actually started using like mineral oil and pine oil and sulfur, and then I got Sprouts, and then I went and saw one of my Green Beret buddies, and then he was like, he's doing microderm, and then all of a sudden, so he's got a solution for regrowing hair. He's using a vitamin C serum plus that, and now he's got more hair. And he's got the picture side by side, so do I. So you have 2 different ways where dudes are regrowing hair without surgery. That's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah.
Because that's way different than what I was told in the past.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that it's interesting to kind of think about doctrines.
Yes, huge.
You know, it's really interesting. Like, so I've been contemplating the idea of breatharianism.
Yes.
Because we think about if this is say that everything I'm doing here is correct,
Yes.
and through vibration and harmonics we can stimulate chemistry.
Yes.
Then everything we learn about biochemistry is about proteins and all these other things. They're going on the Krebs cycle and all that. It takes a lot of energy.
Huge.
Like huge amounts of
Yes,
energy
right.
to break down proteins
Yes.
and everything into bodies to liberate nutrition.
Right.
So why can't we receive nutrients harmonically?
We can't.
Well, so here's why we can't at the moment,
Okay.
in my theory.
Okay. Tell me what you think.
Because we as a species,
Yes.
has created a very strong blueprint of this doctrine about eating.
Yes.
And that construct is what needs to be it's like a morphic field of
Right.
eating.
Right. Sure. There's certain consciousness things that are
Yeah,
happening.
we've created
numerous limiting
consciousness,
beliefs.
yeah.
So
So
here's
we
what
have to kind of, and I feel like it's one of those things, kind of like you said, like there was a construct that man can't go to the moon.
Yes.
And we broke that down, and
Yes.
now we're going to, should we go to, we keep kind of pushing it out.
Yes.
So, or you think about breatharians, one or two things. First of all, who are these breatharians? They just sit and they have to meditate and they don't talk to anybody. They can't use any. So that's kind of the division.
I think there's some differences. I think that there are actually people that are out there that are in Thailand, that are in different places. And one of the guys, when we first met that evening, he just came back from 60 days in the darkness and kind of rejuvenated his body.
See, that's a crazy doctrine.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm just saying. Well, I mean, we saw the guy and he couldn't barely talk because he just came out of the 60 days, but all of a sudden, in a very meek spirit about it, right? And so that was very, very interesting. And so when we look at some of these different things, what I found is that we get older because we already use like 35% of our life force to be able to see with our eyes. And what I really respect
35%?
Yes. And they get 2 basic algorithms in our eyes. So what I really respect about what you're wearing is you're wearing the yellow glasses. And so outside of us catching up for this hour, and you can talk with Dr. Harari, I've been wearing, I've got 2 pairs. I've got yellow blockers, I've got blue blockers, I've got blue blocker vipers over there. And so I know that the blue spectrum is not an optimized algorithm. So when we go through and remove the blue, then we can go from 35% consumption with our eyes. And our eyes, when we digest light, when we watch television, it puts a load on our spleen.
So digesting light.
Absolutely. Those are really
Metabolizing.
empty calories. Is the ultimate. Television, blue screen, etc. It's addictive, but we don't get any nutrients out of it. So we just flip it. We say, well, if the television or the tablet or the phone can take my energy and not give anything back but the addicted blue, right? Well, we could actually change that and have frequencies that can heal us and that can also provide nutrients to us. The other one is that when we eat with our tummy, that this also causes a 35% load to our digestive system. So look, if I get 35% from seeing with my eyes, and I get 35% from eating with my tummy, now we get 30% left over. And nobody can live on that. So we wind up borrowing from the future, and when we do that, we're getting older. So instead, if we just decide to be better stewards with our energy, like what you're wearing is these blue blockers, we go from 35% consumption down to like 5.
Oh wow, is that big of a change?
Right, so it's 80% is in blue. And then if we go back to the next side of the math, well, what's the next side? Well, rather than eating hard, heavy foods with our tummy, which might take up 35%, think about old people who have been eating for a long time. Maybe it's because of all that they can eat then. But they're eating soups, which are pre-digested with bioavailable peptides. They're eating salads, and what do we eat salads for? Salads are leafy green things where probiotics grow. So literally a prebiotic, so probiotics can allow for our intestinal tract to become healthier. So if we just modeled elder people that are actually alive and living and healthy and strong, we can reduce 70% consumption down to like 10. We get an easy A.
That's interesting that you talk about modeling the elderly.
Yes.
Because the dichotomy, the paradox with the elderly is what we started with is they're chronically dehydrated, which reduces their cellular communication by multiple millions of times, which weakens their immune system, which puts them in a place where they're needing to eat soups and salads and all these other things.
So, but let's flip it, right?
Yeah.
So let's flip it. Let's talk about babies. When babies come out, what are they eating? They're eating mother's milk, right? They're eating pureed vegetables, okay? And they're probably eating porridge or a side of soup. So this is what babies are eating. It's only that we have to train them how to get older by jacking up their healthy system already. And we wear down the system. I'm just saying, so your babies, we're wearing down the baby system, and that's how the baby's getting older and aging and progressing. So if we continue to provide babies with high levels of nutrition, they'd stay younger longer. We would stay younger longer. And so this is what I'm finding. So I'm hanging out, you mentioned about float tanks earlier. So every single day, I'm in a float tank. I got magnesium chloride, potassium chloride, because you asked about some of the modalities, right? So what am I doing? I've got one full spectrum infrared sun, and I also use red light, so like marijuana grow lights, except I use them on my testicles, and it increases my testosterone by 400%. All I gotta do is do that 15%. This works for girls too.
So I was interesting you're talking about that because I was thinking about they show that baldness is proportionate to higher levels of testosterone. So, you know.
So how does that work?
Are you asking me or
So my thought, I'm just
this
saying,
thing,
I got to be bald, how did I get to be bald? My thought is, I thought too much, I controlled too much delta, and I've got all the brain maps to be able to show this. So delta is actually is associated with validation. So I lack nutrients, I was at a low brainwave, I needed validation, I got a job as an intelligence analyst. And so I got to do cool stuff. I got to put a $2 billion laser beam over at the Pentagon. I had to build crypto for the NSA. I got to do all kinds of really neat projects. But what was
Barrenger, he's a really interesting guy. He's great to have on this show, and I feel very honored to have you here. And you tell me things that I'm not even sure if I'm even allowed to ask you more about, because you tell me you have some really interesting...
And on the open source side, right, we can talk about open source. So at the Pentagon, you want to check out their $2 billion laser beam. It's called Pentagon Shield. So you can go Pentagon Shield 2, go Google it, go Wikipedia, right? What's more interesting is that in 1946, another one that's cool to go Wikipedia, something called the Malaysian Insurgency or the Malaysian Emergency. This is when SAS and OSS went into Malaysia and changed power without having to go to war. So it turns out that whenever we increase our frequency to be epic in love, we create stability.
So that's our hashtag. So we come in here. Hashtag harmonize humanity.
Bingo, that's it.
and we
And come vibe with us.
And come
which
vibe
is,
with
yeah,
us.
there we go, right? So
Come
everyone
vibe with
should have one of these systems, and everyone should go through and have really cool music kind of mashups, if you will, that challenge our brains so that we can become more aware, more integrated, healthier, and then we create stability. So we get the right jam, the right vibe,
Yeah.
and then we can stabilize that within us, we internalize it, and then we can go to that next level.
That's what I mean. That's what I think. But I feel so. There's two parts. There's technology.
Yes.
But then there's also the company that runs it. And like I said, I've been transitioning out of my old company into my new company.
Yes.
With a whole new cast of characters coming in. And I think about my cellular memory.
Yes. It's full circle.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
so I was like, how can we, if I'm going to be of integrity with Harmonizing Humanity, run
Yes.
a Harmonizing Humanity company, like, how do I stay integrity with that?
Yes.
And then it starts with harmonizing ourselves. It starts with harmonizing myself.
Huge.
And then harmonizing my core team.
Yes.
And then the people that are coming in.
Bingo.
And
It's like layers of the onion.
Yeah.
Just like Byron Katie's The Work, there's levels. So is it true, and then is it true? So I started saying, hey, I'm getting younger, so says my telomeres. But then I'm still bald. I'm like, so is it true? So I'm like, well, I probably should start working on my hair to see if that's even possible, because maybe there's some disconnect.
we were talking about that at the portal.
Mhm.
Is this real or not?
Yes.
And if it is real,
Uh-huh.
because there could be the airy fairy, oh, we're going to a portal,
Sure.
we're going to run to a portal, what did you do this weekend? We went to this portal.
Sure.
Did you really? What happened?
Mhm.
How you changed it? Did you walk through a portal?
Right.
You know, and do people know about it? They don't know about it. Is it conscious? Is it
Sure.
subconscious? But if it's really true,
Mhm.
if we truly walked through created
Mhm.
and accessed a portal to the new earth,
Mhm.
what are the physics and the laws of nature governing that process
Yes.
to allow us to move through the gateway, through the doorway, through the portal, and then come out in a new dimension that has shifted consciousness and reality towards a new earth. And if that's real, what are the ingredients? And that was what I kind of actually talked about. I talk a lot about dimensional shiftings in these regards, but these are the concepts.
So if you will, the two things on building, right? So we can have psychology, right? And you can have the bad psychology, which would be pathology, or you can have psychology and positive psychology. And then we can amplify that, and we can go from positive psychology to philosophy. It's your team, right? It's our family, our team. Then we have positive philosophy, and then we stack on that a positive economy. And so long as that philosophy, that psychology, philosophy, and economy are stacked, we're always going to be winning. And so that's really important. And when you got back to this idea, well, quantum science, quantum physics, quantum mechanics says that, is it a particle or is it a wave? What's determined by the observer? Okay, so in this way, and I studied with a guy named Tom Campbell. So Tom Campbell worked for the Intelligence Security Command for the United States Army. He wrote a book in 1984, published trilogy, kind of similar to The Matrix, if you will, the movie series. But his book is called My Big Toe, and it stands for the theory of everything. Okay, so in 1984 he's writing this, and he writes about what he refers to as the universe being a large consciousness system, and you and I being individuated units of consciousness. Now what's really interesting about that, it's kind of like a big VMware container, and then if you will, that we're kind of like individual versions of operating systems. And what's interesting about these operating systems, they're virtual machines, you can clone them. And what's really cool is we have now technology metaphors that maybe people will understand. Well, what if you have all of these clones? And like this goes back to the metaphor of the analogy with Jesus. He said, or parable, he said, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, which by the way is kind of, I didn't realize that Jesus is probably, not to be offensive, but kind of a smart ass or a comedian, okay? Because he's like the faith, but look, you have faith or you don't have faith, right? And so if you have faith, which is I intend, I attend, and I expect, okay? So he says you can tell the mountain to move over here and it would. But what if we got one operating system here and another one, and over here I load the application called Mountain on Drive C, and over here I load the application called Mountain on Drive D, right? Now, what's interesting is all I would need to do really is detach from, as the observer, this first operating system, and then slide over this cosmic internet, if you will,
Yeah.
and then I look over here at this new operating system where Mountain is on Drive D.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden my faith of letting go, my trust of letting go of the reality I knew, now allows me to be fully absorbed in the new reality that is same, and the only difference is that the mountain's over here.
Exactly.
We could do this in our life in every single
Well,
capacity.
and I think that's like the 100th monkey.
Yes.
You know, it's like, because it always comes in, so for me, with this, your company, it was me.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm starting it, and then who's gonna come? So it's always about the second guy, like, okay, oh, and then that person edifies that first person.
Bingo, yeah.
And they're like,
amplifying
oh,
positive intent. It's
yeah,
about-
and
so
then like,
remember-
oh, that guy, that's really cool.
Yeah, right.
So like, we want to be cool,
Yes.
and that's a cool, popular thing now, and that starts shifting
Huge.
the paradigm, and it's amazing.
So as I build my company, right, so I got about 125 employees that work with and for me, and I am encouraging people, don't ever work for me, just work with me, right? Work for yourself, right?
Okay.
Because like, that's what's true. Okay, everybody's always working for themselves. Okay, and that's actually what's cool about Vedanta. So in ancient Sanskrit, they talk about the universe as being self and about us being the jiva. So if we're actually being selfish, we're working for the greater good of the universe, and that's pretty cool. And so what I'm finding is that I'm asking people, amplify my positive intent. And so, because we can look in life, if I go through and I have an employee that wants to challenge what I'm saying, well then we have noise cancellation, right? If they're out of sync with what I'm saying, then we have reverberation. But what we really want is to say, amplify my positive intent. I stand before you with humility and meekness and say, I have positive intent for me and for my universe. And so with that, I ask you to stand with me and to amplify my positive intent. And as everyone stands in alignment, amplifying it, we have harmony. And this is where we can go through and say harmonize humanity, is that what would happen if, like so Oprah Winfrey, and I'm not sure how much time we have left, but let's just talk about for a moment. Oprah Winfrey started something that I'm going to say is heroic for her time in it. She said, let's do a random act of kindness. But I'm all about continuous improvement, right? I run a business, and if we're going to stay competitive, we're going to continuously improve. Sure. But what's the upgrade from a random act of kindness?
You tell me.
How about like a continuous act of kindness?
Oh, okay.
Okay? But what would be better than kindness? What about like love? Okay? Now that's kind of cool. So we go through and say, well, I'm going to do a random act of love. Now what if I could take it to the next step? What if I did a continuous act of love? Now here's a cool one, right? So there's actually some algorithms that I found that were in the Bible and the Torah. We just go back and talk about it for a second. So we say God is love, right? So because God's in every molecule and God's a frequency, which is also part of what we're doing with sound, right? So that's a frequency of love. The next one that we go through, right? The joy of the Lord is my strength. Well, we're just going to call it an algorithm. We're going to do variable substitution. So we're going to, the joy of love is my strength. Let's read it backwards for a second. We're going to say, when I'm strong in love, because I practice, I exercise love, I'm strong in love, the word we use in English is joy. Okay? And then what's really cool is because everybody loves a good party. Because when you put on your good music, right, not only 11 people, but the whole freaking thing,
Sure.
right? Changed the weather, and everybody started jamming. Okay?
Yeah.
So now we know everybody loves a good party, and that's what's cool about joy. So we're having a good party, and then all of a sudden, the angels and the rest of the cool people come, and everything's vibing the right way because humanity's harmonized, right? And then we take it, to the next level, right? So then we go through and we say, well, now we can float in the sea of consciousness. And when we float in the sea of consciousness, what happens? Now we can have a peace that passes understanding, because this one only holds like the 20,000 events per second.
Yeah.
When we get peace that passes understanding, then we're not holding on to whatever version of reality we had. And now the beautiful thing happens, because we're not efforting. Stuff's still working for us. We're still floating. And then what's really cool is we can see the miracles in every moment. And so this is something that I thought was important to share with you and also with the rest of the viewers, because this is the math on how we let go of trauma, we let go of misunderstanding, we let go of our past. And then we accept because we let go of it. We have two hands to appreciate, and tactily feel and experience our present like a gift. And then what's really cool is that we can see now with free eyes in future pacing, wherever that our heart desires to go. And in these beautiful ways, as the observer in quantum physics, it always happens. So everyth's always working for our benefit. And this gives us, as human beings, if we're going to harmonize humanity, we all have to begin to wake up and to take more responsibility. Did I have an errant thought? does this harmonize me with myself, or does it cause discord in me? Does this harmonize me with my fellow man, with my own family? Does this harmonize me with my world? And so this is a greater degree of responsibility, right? So this is, hey, I have self-worth because I think happy thoughts. I have self-worth because I respect myself, that the only thing that goes inside of me are happy, healthy thoughts, stable thoughts, loving thoughts, joyful thoughts, peaceful thoughts, harmony thoughts. And if I don't know how to do that, hey, getting some outside music to be able to go through and to say, I'm just going to trance out for a little bit. I'm going to let my body heal itself, and I'm going to trust that your positive intent with the music that you're generating is going to allow for me to build a better brain and a new neural net that allows for me to operate at a 2.0 or 3.0. Because as much as you have a tech, it's called 3.0, 3.1, 3.2.
Yeah.
Dude, everybody can have software. We can upgrade the human operating system within all of us. And part of that is, am I willing to rewire? Am I willing to say, and this is what Byron Katie does at the work, is she says, have any thought, and then ask if it's true. And then ask if that's true. And then if you wind up all the way back at the core of where we are, maybe we can take some responsibility for how that we jacked up our thought process to get us way out on the fringe.
Yeah, through programming.
Yeah, so now
Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's kind of what this is all about, is how do we make it accessible to the masses, you know, and I feel like this, I wanted to add to this, we're doing HRV testing with our vibe systems, and we've been doing these 20-minute vibes in the middle, and we've been seeing these really profound changes.
Yes. And
that's the beginning of the research. We're actually going to be doing saliva cortisol testing as well.
Perfect.
And start really kind of establishing these real changes, you know, as a real modality.
And I would just suggest, because you're the one who brought up, you know, frequency nutrient stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I would also look at like hair and tissue mineral analysis, because you can get a kit that doesn't cost a lot, it's pretty scalable, and it's
we were kind of kicking around some of those things.
But why? Because if we're going to be pioneers that are epic, well, then we want to look at, what if I get transducers, and the transducers go through and slap around my body, predate my body. I get lymphatic drainage, I get glymphatic drainage, I let go of my old thoughts, right? I'm going to metabolize nutrients better.
Yep.
I'm going to be able to see from a nutrient test that the right frequencies are going to do exactly what you already theorized.
Interesting.
So set yourself up with the metrics to be able to run the whole panel, and then enlist everybody that's watching to be able to say, hey, wouldn't you like to know what sounds allow for you to lose weight? What sounds allow for you to feel better? What sounds allow for you to be happier? What sounds allow for you to be smarter? Because it's real and it's true and it's measurable, and this is why we're here together being epic.
Thank you. Bob, I have at least 20 more questions I asked you.
Well, but that's just, we call that? We call that episode 10.
Yeah, that's episode 10. I'm like, okay, I think we actually have to end the episode. Right. Please tell us, like, where we can contact you if you want to be contacted.
Sure.
I know you're, whatever,
okay, so
share whatever.
So there's actually pretty cool stuff, right?
Okay.
So just for context, I was on the cover of CIO Review magazine this month.
What is it?
Chief Information Officer, CIO Review. Yes, CIO Review magazine. Okay, the DoD CIO, right? And I mean, he's a really awesome guy. He got 2.25 pages. Me and my company, we got 7.5 pages. The other guy's got 5 million computers, 2.8 million people. So for us, what we're doing is really amazing. So you can find out more about EOR at www.matchyourmission.com. Okay, and so the idea here, so you should be able to work the job you love and live the life you want. So everything that we're doing now is let's let people hire themselves. Let's train people. I've got a $100 million university that I just licensed. We're donating this to young people and even older people. If you want to learn, you want to grow, you want to become happier, you want to become healthier, you become stronger, creating an ecosystem where our tribe comes together. We learn, we have our curiosity that grows, we have our passion that grows, we have our purpose that we find, and then we live our dreams and we anchor them into this reality. And so all of these beautiful things are happening now. You can also find us at www.eor.us. You can email me, Bob, B-O-B, at eor.us as well. So those are a couple of good ways to reach out. I can also share with you that I'm a quantum computer certified programmer. So one of the first 20 in the world. I built a supercomputer for the Joint Strike Fighter, and if you Google Bob Barrenger Linux, you'll see that I was a published author in the area of high-performance computing by the time I was 27.
Well, you got a lot more years than the average person. You graduated high school at 9.
Yes, yes. And so, and then now we get to be here hanging out together.
Yeah,
So I finally
absolutely.
feel like I get to be with some of the cool people, with you and Dr. Harder here. So
Well, thank
you guys.
So, thank you, Bob. And my name is Dr. Stephen Schwartz, and this is the Epic Vibe Show with Dr. Schwartz, Dr. Stephen Schwartz, Dr. Vibe. Please tune in every Monday at 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time for the next episode of the Epic Vibe Show with Dr. Vibe. Thank you, Bob. And you can contact me at bioharmonictechnologies.com, Dr. Stephen Schwartz on all social media channels, and we'll talk to you soon. Adios.